Eileen, would you please call the roll?
Good morning, everyone. Chris Ronayne. Jack Schron.
Here.
Brad Cromas.
Present.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll then move into public comment. I just have a couple of notes.
I'm trying to turn it off.
Before we get started. First of all, we have a minor amendment to the agenda. For the sake of public comment, because we have more folks here than is typical for an investment advisory committee meeting, we're going to adopt the rules of council that council uses to manage public comment prior to beginning that process. So may I have a motion to amend the agenda consistent with that?
So move for that change?
Yeah, and I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. No opposition or abstentions. So, having said that, may I have a motion to adopt the rules of council as they pertain to public comment for purposes of this meeting?
So move.
And I will second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, and no objections or abstentions. So, that is adopted. Now, having said that, I'd like to welcome our guests to the meeting. If you have not yet had a chance to sign in and you intend to make public comment today, please do so. There are sheets over on the table over here for that purpose. Just by way of introductory remarks, as you are all used to, if you've done council comment before or may be aware of, you have 3 minutes to speak. This is your opportunity to share feedback with the committee. There won't be a back and forth with us, but we will be respectful and listen to what you have to say and take that under advisement. Also, we request, consistent with council rules, that comments be kept to the agenda and to items that are pertaining to the work of the body. So, having said that, if Eileen, if you would like to call the first person forward.
Jenna, I don't know how to say your name. Muhadeen.
Is it? Okay. My name is Jenna Muhadeen, and I'm 19 years old. And I want to talk about a 19-year-old in Gaza because one that was born in the same year as me has witnessed 8 wars and many more random bombardments. And a 19-year-old in Gaza can no longer attend college, can no longer fulfill their aspirations of becoming a doctor or an artist or a teacher. They have no food or water or health care or clothes or family. And here I stand telling this to people who, some of which made the decision to fund this war machine and this colonial genocidal project of Israel. This decision is unwise for multiple reasons. Financially, the global political climate is increasingly volatile, and tensions in the Middle East, particularly concerning Israel, create a very unpredictable state that you must be wary of. And as stewards of our taxpayer money, your priority should be to ensure our investments offer good returns, as well as stability and minimal risk. And of course, don't go to a country tried at the International Court of Justice for genocide. My family chose this county and has lived here for almost 30 years. Yet the same county has allocated our funds to a foreign government who has violated international law time and time again. The same occupation that violently relocated my grandparents and my parents, mind you, with members of council not even being aware. I work in an urgent care here in Cleveland, a very low-income neighborhood, and on the daily I see people, 1, with no health care and can't afford to pay out of pocket. 2, they don't know how to get health care. And 3, with issues that need dire attention that have been caused directly by systemic injustice. This is unacceptable, and the giant check that goes to Israel would be much more appreciated by these communities in giving them the help they need, the health care they need, the education that they need. My father is a doctor, and he volunteered almost 10 years of his life at the Red Cross to help those same people when it should have been this county ensuring that we don't have suffering people here. That everyone here at the end of the day has access to well-rounded education, good healthcare, and a place to sleep. And don't make the same mistake that City Council made in making enemies instead of friends. You will have decisions in the future to no longer reinvest in a state that destroyed homes and hospitals, trees, children, families, schools, faces, lives, bodies. So choose the side of justice and morality and support your community here with our money. Invest in bonds that support local and domestic initiatives where the impact is visible here at home and aligns with the people's commitment to social justice and liberation. Thank you. Free Palestine.
Just a reminder, if we could keep the applause and any kind of cheering to a minimum for the sake of decorum. Next. Thank you.
Mohammed Farah.
Good morning, Council. My name is Mohammed Faraj. I'm an attorney here in Northeast Ohio, and I came here to discuss the county's investments in Israel bonds. I am Palestinian. I grew up here in Northeast Ohio, and I'm a lifelong resident of Cuyahoga County, first in North Olmsted, Westlake, Rocky River, now Cleveland. I can stand here and talk about the ethical and the economic and legal implication with these investments. As a Palestinian, the last 6 months have been traumatizing for our community, especially. Many of us go to sleep at night hoping and praying things don't get any worse, only to be disappointed in the morning. And also at the same time, we're battling a world of misinformation and dehumanization. October 7th was the 9/11 for Israelis. They were attacked. It was unprovoked. But nobody is talking about prior to October 7th that 2023 was actually the deadliest year for Palestinians since 2005 in the West Bank alone. So that notwithstanding, I came to talk to you all here first. This is my first comment, public comment, as the body responsible for these decisions, because I was shocked that some members of council were not aware of the reinvestment of the $3 million had occurred, and I'm not familiar with the inner workings of local government here at this time, but I wanted to come here today to begin a dialogue because I don't understand how a significant number of local tax dollars can be invested without any formal action by county council and without notification, review, or approval of that reinvestment. So it appears that there's more discretion in these decisions than one would expect. So I really want to understand, and I want to understand the role of this body, because when I go through and analyze the situation and try to understand things to the benefit of this council, I find myself wondering how oversight of these decisions occur, because I'm very especially interested in the due diligence that occurred as part of this particular decision to reinvest, because all it takes is a simple Google search to find literally hundreds of reports issued by official bodies, human rights organizations, not only here in the United States, but in Israel as well, NGOs, not only documenting current war crimes going on right now that are ongoing, but also past war crimes, the encroachment of Palestinian land through illegal settlements, and the military occupation of Palestinians, including the cruel systems of apartheid that dominates the Palestinian way of life. So I come here to talk about these decisions. I look forward to continued dialogue, and we certainly have a lot to talk about. So thank you for having me here today.
Shireen Nazar.
Hi, I'm Shireen. I'm happy to be here with you all today. I want to start off today talking about my father. My father is an entrepreneur. My entire life, he's owned businesses. My dad's 64 years old currently, but he moved to the United States as a displaced person from Palestine when he was 18. There's never been a time in the memory of my father that he did not own a business alongside his work as an engineer. My dad officially retired last year from his day job and immediately opened yet another business. But this time, for the first time in his life, he didn't open a grocery store, a restaurant, a computer rental store, a tire shop, all businesses he's successfully run. He opened his own engineering firm in Palestine. He now employs over 60 Palestinians in the West Bank, where finding jobs is made nearly impossible by the confines of Israel's military occupation. Checkpoints, constraints on movement, constraints on goods in and out, constraints on the Palestinian government, constraints on education, medicine, food, building permits, all suffocate life in the West Bank. But this has not deterred my father. Growing up around my dad, I've learned a thing or two about running a business. The most important thing I've learned is that the amount of money your business can make is not the only factor in building a successful business. One time when I was fairly young, my dad had me and my siblings scraping graffiti off the side of his convenience store. The next day, it was sprayed over again. People in the neighborhood told my dad he should put up surveillance cameras or call the cops, that the graffiti would be bad for business. My dad did none of those things. That night, my dad grabbed a 6-pack of beer from the cooler, sat outside all evening, and at some point, some young men came by the store. He cracked open those beers and sat and talked to them for 2 hours, and we never had to worry about graffiti again. I grew up in the back room of that store. Neighbors loved my dad. He didn't raise prices on products when we had inflation scares. He never fired someone without talking to them and working with them. I could take up this entire public comment talking about the ways that for my dad, profit came second to building relationships and just doing good work. I just talked to him yesterday. Even now, my father refuses to abandon the engineering firm he started in the West Bank, despite immense hardship in the face of escalating Israeli violence. He told me he's heading back to Birzeit, our hometown, despite the dangers. There are over 60 engineers depending on me over there, he said. Not, I need to run a business because I could lose money if I don't. Not, I have a bottom line I need to meet. My dad spoke of the engineers depending on him to be able to sustain their livelihoods when jobs are scarce. I imagine what a world we could live in if more people were like my dad. If our economic systems and our government systems would invest in people like my dad instead of violent governments. My dad taught me and my siblings that sometimes it has to be about more than the bottom line. It also has to be about our values. I would respectfully ask each of you, what values drive a decision to put any amount of money, even a single dollar, into a government that has killed over 10,000 children in 6 months? I don't believe those are your values. And therefore, I would ask that we stop investing in foreign governments accused of war crimes and invest in people like my dad right here at home, who both run successful investments while building their communities, not tearing them down. Thank you for your time.
Carly Riggins.
Hello, my name is Carly Riggins, and I'm here to talk about Israel bonds. The decision was recently made to reinvest $3 million into Israel bonds. And not only was this decision made without the knowledge of the larger council, but it was made in the middle of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. There's no excuse for this decision. We've all watched in real time as millions of Palestinians have been bombed, forcibly displaced from their homes, starved, tortured, illegally imprisoned, and more. The money you have chosen to invest in this settler colonialist state, in this illegal occupation and apartheid state, is directly funding these crimes. You are complicit in these atrocities, and you have made all of us complicit as well. Think about what those $3 million could do here. The number of families we could feed, the number of homes we could provide, the number of school programs we could fund and help foster. Reinvest the $16 million we keep in foreign governments into this community and help the people here. Thank you.
Nima. Tanmay Shah.
Good morning. My name is Tanmay Shah, and I'm a Cleveland resident. I've lived in Northeast Ohio for almost 15 years now. I'm an immigrant from India, and I moved here when I was 10. I've been practicing law for the last 2 years now in Cleveland, helping low-income tenants beat evictions and try to stay and keep a roof over their heads as long as they can. It was tough work. I watched tenants not be able to afford $500, $600 in rent, and they would be evicted. Working moms who lost a job and they couldn't make rent. And then we find out that our county has invested $16 million in a foreign government committing war crimes. I'm ashamed. How can we do this? What are our values? Just a couple months ago, we opened a welcome center for refugees and immigrants in this county. As an immigrant myself, I was pretty proud of that. I said, hey, look at this. This is what Cuyahoga County is doing. Maybe we can have more people that look like me, that come here, work here, and build their life here. And then we find out this is what happens with our county funds. We've already invested hundreds of millions of dollars in a new jail against the wishes of our citizens. And then the investment committee, which, as we know, Brad is the one who actually makes the decision to invest that money. But we also know Brad didn't want to do that himself, but rather it was probably called by Chris. And that's, what are your values when we come to this and we find out all these war crimes? This was after almost 150 days of genocide in Gaza, and we say, yeah, let's put $3 more million into that. Is that really where we stand? Is that really what Cuyahoga County looks like? Robert Sprague, our Ohio's treasurer, came down here just 2 weeks ago selling these Israel bonds and getting more people to invest in them. Those are Republican values. I mean, as a lifelong Democrat, I could buy that. But for blue blood Cuyahoga County, where do we stand? It looks like we stand with the Republicans when it comes to genocide and war crimes. I'm ashamed.
That's all the names I have.
Thank you all for coming down and sharing your feedback. I know especially during the workday, that's not an easy thing to do, so thank you for that. The next item on our agenda is approval of our minutes from our prior meeting on January 25th. Everyone should have received those and had a chance to review at this point. Any questions, Mr. Sharon?
No, I move they approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Okay, moved, and I will second. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No opposition or abstentions, that motion carries. And the Jasons are on now, I understand. For meter, all right. We'll move into discussion of our portfolio and funds. The floor is yours.
Okay. Keep going. Ricky, can you keep going on to slide, I think it's 5. Those were the minutes. There. Back one. Okay, so these are all of our accounts up in the top. The bank deposits, the Star Ohio funds are held by, are held in Huntington Bank through the Treasurer of the State of Ohio. That's where we send all of our excess funds that are not in operations daily. We work out of that. As we need money, we go back and forth through that account. Key, PNC, US Bank, those are other daily operations that we work out of those accounts as well. And down the next section is the investments, and Meter is going to primarily hold all the conversation on the investments. I don't think we have any, unless anybody do you have any questions on that, committee members? No. If you go to the next slide, please. Jed's going to talk about the opioids. Oh, here, sorry. There you go.
Also, per our last meeting, we were looking at investing a lot of the money we were carrying in sweep. And this is the result of that. So now our full $60 million is invested in structured investments. So we've locked in those higher interest rate environment that we're currently enjoying. So, and that's staggered. So we'll have maturities starting when Star Ohio is exhausted, and we'll start being able to reinvest or be able to fund the diversion center as these bonds mature. We currently have about $5 million invested in the maximum 5-year time range. So we're funded for the opioid center through at least 2029, with about $5 to $9 million, ready to fund after that.
And what's the return rate on those two?
The return rate on the bonds we've recently reinvested with Meter ranges between 4.5% to 4.75%.
And then the daily rate?
Today it is 5.46,
And that's just overnight, right?
correct.
Okay, thank you.
Next slide. Oh, go back one, please. Okay, so that daily rate was at the end of the quarter. So the yield went down, or it's 5.47 for the end of the first quarter. And then we added an extra slide, an extra picture on the right-hand side, just to show the fluctuations of the interest rates quarterly. Okay? Any questions?
Yeah, I don't think that tells the entire story. That's a pretty short story. I think in the future, we should tell a little bit longer story,
Okay,
because I think that those rates are, that looks like it's steady at that rate, but
it's really
anything-
not,
It's anything but steady.
right.
You go back 12 months or 18 months behind, before that, those have been floating at around 1.5%, 2%, I would assume.
Okay, we'll extend the graph.
This is up to 12 months.
What's that?
It's 4 quarters presented, so it's actually presenting 12 months. Would you like 12 quarters presented? Or would you like it presented on a monthly basis?
No, I like, no, the quarters are fine. I think that take a 1-year snapshot is not.
This is a 1-year snapshot.
But I'm suggesting it should be a 3 or 4 year snapshot to give you more of a trend line.
Yeah, one thing that we consider doing, Mr. Sharon, is adding the monthly comparison and yearly comparison here. Because one of the reports we get from Meter on a weekly basis has the Star Ohio rate today, 1 month ago, a year ago. If that's of use, that might potentially be something we could add.
That's nice, but what we've got is we have because inflation has taken place, it's driven this up, but inflation was running at 2% only 3 years ago, and so that would have dramatically affected the returns on these.
So like a 4-year look back.
Yeah, I
based on
think
the
so,
end of the
yeah.
end of the year. Okay.
Yeah, you can do that. Okay,
Nothing more than a quarterly is fine. I mean, it doesn't swing that much within a quarter.
no. Thank you. Okay, Jason and team, you're up.
Perfect. And I know we have a packed agenda with wanting to spend the majority of the time on the investment policy here today. So we will be brief with our comments, and certainly I know the packet was disseminated earlier. So if there is anything we don't touch on that anybody would like to go into in more depth, please, by all means, go ahead and raise any questions. Otherwise, we will go ahead and dive in. So I will turn it over to Jason Szabo, our Director of Fixed Income, for a few economic comments.
Excellent. Thanks, Jason. So kind of really on high, walk through what's the changes from a growth outlook perspective, touch on inflation in monetary policy, and then also the unemployment in labor markets. So really starting with on the next page was really important to walk through what's going on from expectations for throughout 2024, particularly looking at as we've gone through 2021 with a lot of the reopening. 2022 we had a really extraordinarily strong labor market. Obviously inflation dynamics was a really big story on 2022, and as we've gone to 2023, we had another interesting dynamic with Q3 and Q4 GDP growth rates were significantly above trend. But as we go here in 2024, there's broad expectations from a number of economists that are surveyed that we're going to get back to a more normalized economy, where we're going to start to get away from a lot of that nuances and challenges with whether supply chain and labor market dynamics that were plaguing from the reopening of the pandemic. The economy is going to start to get back into a normal sync, with a lot of the dynamics going to result back to GDP growing into a normal trend that we saw pre-pandemic. And a lot of that is going to be a function of government spending. That's been a significant tailwind in 2022 and 2023, particularly as the federal government was trying to incentivize the onshoring and reshoring, particularly manufacturing and semiconductor, that resulted in significant GDP growth. Then on top of that, we had strong consumers throughout 2022 as the labor market was significantly tight. And we saw wage growth that was significantly higher in 2022 and 2023 that were broad expectations for the consumers. That those tailwinds are now going to start to become headwinds, where we've seen a lot of the rebalancing with respect to the labor market, where folks are having viewing the economy as slowing down and resulting in them having less confidence in transition to new jobs, as the compensation environment is significantly lower than it was in last year. That will significantly result in the consumer spending getting much lower. So as a chart we'll look at is GDP is expected to, for Q1 coming into this year, it was to get to 2%. And we had coincidentally the release this morning of the GDP number, which was far below the initial expectation of 2%, and it came in at that 1.6% level here to start the year. So on high, getting a much slower growth environment that we've experienced in the past. Then really going to talk through is the inflation environment, and then on high, what does it mean for monetary policy? So as we've exited 2023 and 2022 with inflation significantly higher, we've seen a ton of progress as it relates to the inflation coming down, where we've gone from the peak PCE perspective of well into that 7%. And we've gone to headline inflation to that 2.5% area. And the couple things that are really preventing the number to come down back to the 2% goal. And a lot of them are tied to some lingering effects from the pandemic, particularly the housing market has remained quite strong despite the higher interest rates. And the other area that's been fascinating is some sources of strain from a pricing perspective is car insurance. And again, it's been very tied to some of the pandemic related activities, given the car insurance market is significantly regulated. We saw used car prices and new car prices rise significantly over 2022 and 2023 has resulted in PCE and the inflation measures to continue to show premiums for car insurance to be elevated, but that's expected to continue to cool throughout 2024 to get inflation much closer to that 2% target for the Fed. Now, the last piece to touch on is going back to what does this mean for monetary policy and rate expectations. As the Federal Reserve is laid out at the close of 2023, expectations for cuts into 2024, conditioned on them gaining greater confidence that we're going to be able to achieve that 2% target over time. And they've sought for the first part of the year to gain more confidence with the outlook for inflation to get to 2% over time.
Jason, may I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah.
Which
Yeah.
slide are you on?
We're on this, I guess it was really that slide 2 is where we're just using as a broad slide to kind of walk through highlights, all the broad economic data points, because there's a lot to go through if you went to each one of those slides.
Sure. Yeah, just making sure in the room we had some questions on that. So please continue. Thank you.
Gotcha. So I guess settings, if you can go to slide 4, we can really hit on or slide 6, sorry, is really the expectations for, there's one more on page 6, sorry there, yeah. So going to the monetary policy, again, there's broad expectations to start this year. Cuts will be 3 throughout the course of the year. And the Fed is looking to gain that greater confidence in order to achieve that longer term expectations of that 2% inflation target. The first 2 months of CPI and PCE were a little bit stronger than initially expected. That's resulted in just a continuation of Fed commentary that they're still expected to see cuts in 2024. We're just delaying the timing of that ultimately to the summer, perhaps later into the fall, as we've seen more success from the inflation environment that's broadly expected to occur given what's underneath the drivers of inflation there.
Jason, what's your best guess? What's your best guess on the 3?
On the 3, the actual months. So our best guess is best guess is the 3. Yeah, we're broadly expecting on the 3 to start here in 2024, and really the late summer to early fall is the beginning time periods.
You're still forecasting 3? Are you for?
Yeah,
I see the Fed's. There's still talk about that, but I didn't know if you were. 3 rate cuts. Our broad expectations are very similar given the drivers underneath the hood from some of these categories that 3 is our base case expectation at this point. Any additional questions from the economic side?
None for me, thank you.
Not for me.
Okay, hearing none, I will jump in. If we could direct to slide number 10, I will address each of the portfolios, give the overarching allocation themes, and talk through as we normally do. Starting first with the core portfolio overall. At the end of the quarter, the total portfolio stood at just shy of $950 million. You see the weighted average maturity in the middle left of the page. We are still hanging in right at around 2.5 years overall, resulting in a weighted average yield across the portfolio of just over 2.5, specifically 2.57%. So each quarter, as we have looked at quarter over quarter, the yield continues to tick higher. As those reinvestments, we are able to go out and lock in those higher rates within the portfolio as we've continued to discuss. The result has an estimated annual yield of just over $24 million. The portfolio on high, north of 80% of the portfolio allocated to U.S. Treasury and agency securities, 15% approximately being corporate securities would be the second largest holding across the board. And then at the bottom, you will see there has not been a significant change to the overall maturity distribution, still having the portfolio laid out at 50% of the portfolio being maturities within 2 years as those securities continue to age down. And where opportunities present themselves, we will selectively swap out, sell securities to go out and buy some of the longer term securities, and just continuing to roll the specific maturities out longer as those securities mature. Flipping forward to slide 11, from a compliance standpoint, the core portfolio, if we could advance one, each of the specific allocations all fall within the parameters of the investment policy. And then forwarding to slide 13, we will review the opioid settlement fund. So Jed gave some comments around this. More specifically, the portfolio, the remaining about 30% of the portfolio was put to work in those longer dated securities to lock in the yields as discussed and agreed upon prior. The overall portfolio standing at just shy of $62 million. The weighted average maturity similar to the core portfolio, falling in at 2.5 years. The weighted average yield just a tick higher at slightly over 3%, based specifically on that large chunk of cash that was allocated to the portfolio more recently at those yields in that 4.5 to 4.75 range, as Judd described. The estimated annual income now standing over the next 12 months at just over 1.8 million, and you'll see the maturity spectrum at the bottom as well. Finally, on slide 14, from a compliance review, all again remaining in check to the policy within the specific opioid settlement fund. I'll pause there for any questions from the committee.
I have no questions, sir.
I don't have any questions either, Jason. And Jason, thank you very much for the presentation. I would just note that there was a new slide that we added, so slide 9, if you'll refer to that in your slide deck, is something that we requested. It shows the meter managed portfolio and its performance over time, both in relation to the size of the portfolio, weighted average maturity, and average yield, just to kind of give you, again, some additional context for performance. So that's something we're going to ask them to be providing us on a rolling basis going forward as well. Okay, nothing else then, gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that. May I have a motion to accept the presentation as presented?
So move.
And second, any discussion? All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. No abstentions or objections, so that motion carries. Next items on the agenda are under other business. We have investment policy draft review. In the packet, the policy that was provided is an old draft. I think that was a Microsoft Word issue, so we apologize for that. In the interest of not delving into something that is not the most current version, we'll forego that for our next meeting. So we'll distribute that to you before then, and we'll have a chance to discuss at our next meeting this summer. So having said that about the investment policy, the link deposit piece is also under other business. Just wanted to give you an update on where we stand with that. As you know, the county is currently involved in 2 link deposit programs, the HELP program and the Heritage Home program. We're currently in an ongoing discussion with the Housing and Community Development Department on revamping both of those. The HELP program replacement will be called Neighborhood Equity Works, Cuyahoga or New Cuyahoga, and we'll have a home repair element that is focused on energy efficiency, as well as an element for Main Street small business development. So that's still in the offing. We are distributing the draft version of that proposal to banking partners next week for feedback and response, at which point we plan to incorporate that feedback into a draft, and then we'll have something to bring to council for review as we move forward on that. So just wanted to give you an update. That is moving forward. We're excited about that. It's an opportunity to do some community reinvestment and to take advantage of those higher interest rates that are there to help our community get a lower rate on the loans that they could otherwise qualify for those two tranches of work. So any questions on that?
Sure. In regards to the linked deposits, what kind of activities do we believe that we can link them to get benefit to us as a, for our portfolio and for our county funds?
It's a good question. So the way linked deposits work are that we buy an instrument with a banking institution, usually it's a CD, and we take an intentional reduction on the rate of return. The bank then makes a commensurate reduction in lending in a commensurate amount to achieve a public policy goal. So in this case, green energy, home improvements, and small business development. So that's a policy decision. It's a small part of the portfolio. We're still looking at what that would probably be. I think $60 million was the number that has historically been involved with HELP and Heritage Homes, so something commensurate with that is probably likely, but that's still kind of in conversation.
And how are we monitoring what they're actually doing to invest in those tools?
There is an application process that folks go through on the front end, so they have to basically tell us, you know, here's what we're doing. We check to see if they're current on their taxes, et cetera, and then they have 1 year to complete their project, at which point they're supposed to provide a piece of feedback to us that says, you know, we did it or we didn't. If they didn't actually fulfill those obligations under the agreement, then their interest rate returns to market rate at the time the loan was made, so they get an increase in their rate of in their payback that they have to make, and that's the penalty provision of that. Historically, people generally complete these. There's not a lot of folks who you know, default, for lack of a better term, on those. And the nice thing for the county is that the risk of a default is borne entirely by the financial institution. The link is just in the amount and the interest rate. So there's no, you know, no county dollars are involved in terms of being at risk for that kind of loss.
Yeah, I didn't mean to be digging into the individual's element. It was more, is the institution doing their part to commit the funds? There's sometimes the conversations are that we as a body have chosen that institution. They have chosen to promise that they're going to do this, and at times perhaps they don't carry out that half of the promise. The individual, once they get their loan, I have all the confidence that they're going to do their best they can to make that payment on time. So there's satisfying the institution's obligation. It's the institution doing their piece of the public component, and I want to make sure we're monitoring. If they say they're going to do X amount of dollars, they're going to have them on the street. I'd like to make sure that institution, because we're giving them our business, we're giving the institution our county business to administer it. I want to make sure they're doing their half to get that money on the streets for the benefit of our citizens.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. And one of the things that's unique about the way linked deposits are set up from the banking perspective, we are required under ORC to offer participation to everybody who does business in the county with brick and mortar. So that's who we're going out to next week to ask them to participate. So it'll be a separate depository agreement process from the banking contract piece. So that's, you know, we'll have an opportunity to engage them on that level. But I appreciate that feedback. That's a good note.
And the commitment is that you think they're going to put $60 million on the street?
In total, that's what we believe we'll be committing as a county. That's kind of in conversation still, but that's roughly the outlines of what we've historically done there.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. There are no further questions then. That we've reached the conclusion of our agenda. Take a motion to adjourn.
So move.
And without objection, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much. We'll see you this summer.